So the COP26 climate summit is underway at the moment as I'm recording this. And over the last couple of days, we've had a lot of world leaders and a lot of celebrities and things like that saying a lot of lovely things about how we need to protect the planet, and a lot of very scary things about how the planet is in a lot of danger and the natural world is sort of collapsing around us. But what actually is going on? What are the actions that are being taken by governments and by large corporations and things like that? And does this climate summit actually have anything real to offer people in the way of action that's going to actually do something? Well, let's start with the obvious. So the country that it's happening in is in Scotland. It's in Glasgow. So of course all eyes were on the UK Prime Minister. All eyes were on Boris Johnson to essentially project global leadership on this issue. This issue that supersedes pretty much all others. And I'm happy to say that the rhetoric was all good, at least, right? But the actions, unfortunately, tell a slightly different story. The UK has committed to, I think, investing 3 billion overseas in different developing countries to help them reach net zero carbon emissions quicker and help them protect themselves against climate disasters and things like that. And I believe that'll be over the next sort of half a decade. That money will be going there. We've also, talked about kind of these vague promises of having more electric cars, of implementing sort of high-speed infrastructure and public transport that's eco-friendly. Obviously, trains and railways and things are very, very a positive step. They're very good for reducing emissions. And we've said all these kind of things, but at the end of the day, the UK is not on track to meet its Paris Climate Agreement targets. Now, those targets aren't even adequate, right? So you may be thinking, well, we're not quite there, but if we really hurry along, really push ourselves over the next decade or so, we'll be able to reach those targets. Well, even if we do, there will still be significant damage to the natural world, to the climate of our planet. And we will still have huge problems with climate refugees. People having to flee their homes because places become uninhabitable. We'll still have huge issues with increased risk of pandemics and things. We'll still have way more freak weather events. We'll still see mass extinctions and the collapse of certain ecosystems which could have absolutely devastating consequences for the global economy, for supply chains, and even for people's diet and the quality of their water and their air, and basic things like that. So that's not adequate, right? Net zero by 2050, which is what we've said we're going to do. What most climate scientists think is ideal is net zero as soon as possible, which for most developed countries is 2030 or maybe 2035, right? But we're miles away from that. We're not even pretending to be aiming towards that and progressing towards that. So this really, it's a bit depressing, the whole kind of situation. So we are far away from reaching our target. So as much as Boris Johnson urges the rest of the world's leaders to, do something about it and to actually start taking proper action, he himself is not taking proper action. The UK, we've just ratified the establishment of some new oil and gas fields in our own country. It's ridiculous. Obviously, Joe Biden is one of the other big names there. So maybe you might be thinking, well, at least Biden, the Democrats are a bit more progressive. They have better climate policies. Not really, no. A lot of the best things in the original plan for Biden's infrastructure bill, which was going to basically address all kinds of different problems that America's having at the moment, especially to do with, like public transport and public services and industry and things like that. And obviously climate kind of was the overarching theme of all of that, really. Most of the good stuff has been gutted now. It's been removed, taken out of the bill, mainly because of protest, because obviously the Republicans don't support it. If it's good legislation, there's a 99.9% chance the Republicans just won't support it, right? But a few Democrats have voiced concerns, and especially Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, who are two Democratic senators. They are bought and paid for by the fossil fuel industry, the pharmaceutical companies, the health insurance companies, the military-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex. The list goes on and on and on and on. They often receive massive donations from think tanks and very wealthy individuals, very wealthy lobbying organizations and things, and then consequently they vote against anything that challenges the profits of those tiny number of people at the top of those companies, and their power and their influence. So that bill has been gutted, right? And Biden either deliberately hasn't done anything about it because he doesn't care, or is just a bit incompetent and hasn't thrown his weight around because he's the actual president of the United States. If the Democratic leadership wanted to, if they really wanted to, they could just go out onto the airwaves and constantly hammer Manchin and Sinema over and over and over again to get real climate action done and to improve all the other pieces of help and, expanded programs and infrastructure investment and things like that in the bill. So Biden didn't really have much to offer us, right? And of course the guy's only lucid about 15% of the time anyway. So who else? Surely someone is gonna pull something out of the bag. Well, it's scheduled that Chinese President Xi Jinping will make a written address to the summit, and that is very worrying because it seems likely that that speech is just gonna reiterate stuff that he's already said, and none of that is particularly awe-inspiring. It doesn't really instill a lot of confidence. China is the biggest polluter in the world. They release the most greenhouse gases of any nation. However, you have to remember also it is an enormous country. It has the largest population of any country on earth. Obviously India has a similar issue. It's producing a lot of CO2, a lot of greenhouse gases, and it's polluting the air, the water, the soil, everything in that country is really suffering. But these are enormous nations and they are developing nations, right? So you have to bear that in mind. And of course, historically, it's Britain and the US and Germany and France, and to an extent Japan as well, who have been the big polluters, right? Overall, the G7 nations contribute more than China does, and of course they used to contribute far more historically. Obviously Britain was the first country to properly industrialize. But China's plans currently are to try and achieve net zero by 2060. Now that is so far away from what we need to be seeing from China that it's quite devastating, I'll be honest. It's quite devastating to hear that. Obviously, it's better than nothing, I guess, but it's very much inadequate. Like I said, net zero by 2030 is really where all the countries, certainly the developed countries and a few developing ones, need to be aiming for. I believe there are 2 nations that are about on track, maybe a little behind, sort of, to reach their Paris Climate Accord, their commitments of net zero by 2050, and I think they're both African nations. One of them's Morocco, I think. I can't remember the other one. But these are not hugely wealthy, hugely powerful countries. You'd imagine that a country like the UK or the US or Germany, or Japan, would be able to do something about this, because we are wealthy countries and we're also developed countries. China is, of course, it's the largest economy in the world. Certainly, if you look at GDP in terms of purchasing power parity, it's a larger economy than America. But it is a developing country as well, right? So you do have to understand that about China and about India, and similar things have to be applied for countries like Indonesia as well. But regardless, it's simply not good enough. China will be horrifically affected as well, and India. It's not as if, they're safe. The only country that I think is acting, the only major influential country that I think is acting out of selfishness, based on the fact that they think climate change won't really affect us, who cares, at least not negatively, is Russia. Because obviously Russia has a lot of tundra, and that will melt as global temperatures rise, and potentially that could be used for all kinds of different things, that land. It could be used for industrialization, investing in infrastructure development. You could have new cities popping up, obviously a lot of land for agriculture and things like that. So there might be natural resources there. There's all sorts, right? Now, of course, it's a horrible, horrible thing to imagine, because that tundra is naturally supposed to be there. You get rid of it, and who knows what it might unleash. There could be devastating floods and monsoons for a while in Russia and in other countries. There, of course, will be really, really horrible consequences for local ecosystems. Who knows what might happen. And there are even concerns about ancient viruses living in permafrost, which sounds like something from a horror film. So let's not do that. Vladimir Putin did not attend the conference, to the surprise of, I think, absolutely nobody. Russia doesn't care about climate change at all, and it's up to the rest of us, I think, to just try and make this work. So generally, when you look at the way all of the heavy hitters have addressed or are going to address worries at this conference, at this summit, it makes for very, very forlorn reading indeed. I think that perhaps we're a bit fucked. There really isn't an awful lot that can be done if things don't really start to change within the next sort of 5 or 6 years. The only tiny shred of hope I'm clinging on to is that, maybe when artificial intelligence gets sufficiently advanced, it'll be able to solve problems for us. But that brings with itself a whole lot of new issues. And look, these things sound like they're very far away. Devastating climate change sounds like it's very far away. AI seems like it's very far away. Issues with, demographic, changes and aging populations and automation and, all kinds of other things. Coronavirus is becoming more and more frequent. Superbugs becoming antibiotic resistant because we're using them too much in agriculture and things like that. These are all huge issues that are starting to manifest in a very real way, and world leaders and large corporations seem to have no plan whatsoever to deal with any of it. And the only thing that they seem to have any idea about is climate change, and that is really insufficient anyway. So be angry, be worried, yeah. Don't let the anxiety overwhelm you. Worry is only useful if it inspires you to actually do something about it and make things better, address the problem. But of course we're individuals, so that's a lot harder. So think about it next time. If you live in a democracy, just think about it next time. Alright? When you go to vote, who has the best climate plan? Who has the plan that is supported by climate scientists? Yeah, I'm sorry this video is pretty bleak, but there you go. Climate change is an opportunity to create a much, much better society, not just by staving off the horrible, effects of the catastrophe, but by actually then building up something new, rejuvenating society, and then going forward even further. You know, think about all of the fantastic high quality unionized jobs we could get people. Think about how we could use industry and innovation, science, technology, machine learning, all of these things to our advantage, automation to our advantage, creating a more sustainable world. Wouldn't just be good because it would stop massive wildfires and huge floods and freak hurricanes happening all the bloody time. It would also be good because it's good. The air being clean is just a good thing. The water being safe and plentiful is just a good thing. People having good jobs is a good thing. The government making sure that when ultra wealthy people make a lot of money, a fair amount of that goes in from taxes, goes into investing in public services and infrastructure and industry and good jobs and things like that. That's just a good thing. Right? We're talking about improving living standards. We're talking about creating a world that is generally more prosperous and more equal and more free. So let's do it. You know, I wish it was just that easy to convince world leaders about that, but you know, I guess we'll see. I do think that, you know, if there's any country that's going to lead the way on this, it is Britain, and I certainly hope we do. I'm interested to hear your thoughts though on this. Make sure to leave them in the comments below if you'd like, and as always, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.